first meeting with Jim Cornette, and the question I love to ask the most, the first time you saw him blow a gasket at something very minor.
So I was in Florida, as you said. Tommy Rogers told me, "Hey, Jimmy's opening this promotion. Me and Bobby's been working for him some up in your area." And I was like, "Oh, great, great," And I ran into him at the gym. He'd come over to Malenko's a couple of times, get some ring time before we went to Japan. And then he also worked at the same gym my brother and I did. And so he said, he said, "Would you be interested?" And I said, "Hell yeah," because I'd already been talking to Robert Fuller about going to Memphis maybe, because he worked out the same gym as well. So they knew I was trying to work my way back up to my home area. Cause I grew up on this wrestling in this area, the Memphis, the old Memphis style, the old Southeastern wrestling and stuff. So anyway, when Tommy told me that, I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." He goes, "What are you doing tonight about 9?" And I said, "I'll be home." Like I said, I live with my brother, we trained together, and it was really working out nice. And so Cornette didn't call. Actually, he did. I'm sorry. I called Jimmy. Let me reword. I called Jimmy that night about 9, and he goes, "Bobby, I'm really busy. I'll get right back to you. I know who you are. I'll get right back to you." Something to that effect. But I didn't hear back from him. So next day at the gym, Tommy asked me, did Jimmy call you? And I said, "Yeah, but it's really brief." And I said, he said, "Call back," but never. He goes, "He'll call you tonight." So that night at 9:00, Jim Cornette calls me. "Hey, Bobby, I'm aware of your name. Tommy spoke real highly of you. He says you work with Dean. You work like Bobby, or a lot with Bobby. You kind of look like Bobby. Send me some stuff." So I sent him a VHS tape and some pictures I had. Now this was in, and he said, "I'm not full time right now, but I'm getting ready to go full time." So it's like February when the very first TVs are coming out, about 92. And I'm like, "Okay." So didn't really hear back from him. I came home in early June after mailing that package to him, and there was a Smoky Mountain show about an hour from my house at a town I'm very familiar with, very popular wrestling town. And I said, "Well, I'm not doing anything. I'm getting ready to go back to Canada." That's why I came from Florida back here, just kind of hung over to see my parents and family. So I drove up to that show, and I got there early. Here comes Cornette, and he comes in, and that's our first in-person meeting. And shook my hand. He goes, "Bobby Blaze," we started talking, and I had some new promos and another video, and we sit there and talked for probably 20 minutes. And he said, "Are you going to stick around to the show?" I said, "I'd like to." He goes, "Yeah, do." He goes, "When you watch the show, see where you think you might fit in here at." And I said, "Oh, okay, great." So I had already known a couple of the guys that's on the show. So I went to the babyface side, and I knew Robert Gibson a little bit, Brian Lee just a little bit, and Scott Armstrong was there, but I didn't know him at all at that point. I knew who he was, of course. And Brian was like, "Hey, you think about coming in?" I'm like, "I hope so. Let's see what happens. I've got another tour lined up, blah, blah, blah." So after that tour, I called him again, and I had just a couple weeks off, and off to Australia I went. And when I got right back from Australia, Bobby Fulton called me, put me on a show. The next week, Cornette called me and said, "Hey, Bobby Fulton really put you over too." So now I got Tommy and Bobby and, this and that. And Corny calls me and says, "Hey, you want to have a tryout match?" And I was like, "Yeah." So it took 9 months, from the first contact of that. And then I went to Beckley, West Virginia. And that's where I had my tryout match against Brian Lee. Jimmy took us into the bathroom. I'm like 6'1", 220 at the time, something like that. Here's Brian Lee, like 6'8", 280 stacked. And Jimmy, we'd already talked, Brian and I had, like even before. And Jimmy said, "Hey, Bob, you have any problem putting Brian over, do you?" And I'm like, he goes, "He's our first TV champion. It's not." That's what I did. I looked, I go, "Dude, what's your finish?" I said, it's no problem. Whatever you want. And Brian goes, "Well, I do this thing, shoulder breaker." And he goes, "Real easy." And Jimmy goes, "Bobby, just go out there and give me 10 minutes. And I go, "Brian, you want anything special?" He said, "You're the heel, call the match." So I got there and worked the match. Cornette come up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, let me keep my eye out for you." And about a week and a half, 2 weeks later at the Bluegrass Brawl, Robert Gibson blew his ankle out. And he was coming up from Pensacola at the time. And Corny called me and he said, "Bobby, I got a 3 or 4 day loop. Can't remember. It's right up in Kentucky, all within a couple hour distance of my home." And he said, "Would you like to fill in on a card?" So I said, "I'd love to." So every night I worked with Tom Pritchard for the first 3 nights. And then they moved, Tim Horner moved up on the card and made a tag team with Ricky, I guess is what it was. And then Tom worked twice. And I'm like, man, that's good experience, because I'm in the very first match with Tom Pritchard. And then Jim Cornette is right there managing. So he can see my stuff, you know what I'm saying? And then, and I just, Tom would do, you know, power bomb, boom, 1, 2, 3. But it was a good even match, 15-minute match opener, you know. And like the fourth night, Mark Curtis came to me and he said, Bobby, what's your finish? And I go, what? I'm going to put Tom over. And he goes, no, we got a guy we brought in, and he's going to put you over tonight. And I go, okay. And I go, who is he? He goes, a guy named Mike Sampson. And he's on a lot of Smoky Mountain tapings. And I knew Mike from the Independents. And I said, oh, man, I know Mike. And I said, just tell him to watch the drop kick off the top rope, because I've been really tweaking at the Northern Light suplex, but I wasn't real confident in it at that particular point, because I was just training with Dean on that right prior to leaving Tampa. Anyway, went out there and got a win, and you know, that put me over. Someone here likes me, you know. Then I won the Battle Royal later on that night, and from there I went and done one more house show with Taz was leaving. And Jimmy called me and said, Bobby, I don't have you on a booking sheet, but this is in West Virginia. How close are you to this town in West Virginia? And I was like an hour and a half away. I told him, he said, well, can you be there? I was like, yes, sir. You know, so I drove up there, and it was Taz's last day, and it was last day of their loop. And I got to work with Taz before he went, you know, his Tasmaniac or whatever, before he busted out up in ECW. And that night, Jimmy came to me and said, you know, hey, would you like to come in? So, yeah, yes, sir, I would. And he goes, I was wearing old black trunks with black boots with red laces, red trim, BB, or, you know, that's just kind of in honor of Malenko. And he said, and I did have gear, though, that had flames all over it. But I just, you know, wasn't ready for that. He goes, you got some gear, if anything, it's more flashy. I said, yes, sir, I do. And I pulled it out and showed him. He goes, start wearing that. And from there, it was just a good relationship professionally and personally. You know, we kind of hit it off pretty good. As far as him going off, blowing a gasket, I've seen him do that a couple of times, but I'll just put myself in that situation. We probably only had one time that we butted heads, and it was completely my fault. But I was going to, I've heard him call someone else an idiot that didn't work at that company much longer after that day. You can probably put 2 and 2 together who that is. But I've seen him go off on people, you know. But in my situation, I think we only had one conflict, and I can understand why. So I was going to wrestle Larry Santos, who was a very good enhancement talent, and it was for TV. And then I didn't know this at the time, but the next match was going to be Killer Kyle, but he was going to be wrestling Mike Furnas, and Furnas was just breaking in, so he knew a football tackle, you know what I'm saying? And Mike was a hell of a good guy, but I for whatever reason, I'm at the top of the stairs with Bullet Bomb Armstrong and Larry Santo. So Bullet's going to go out because he's going to the announcer table. He's a commissioner, so we're all going to go out and go to our spots. And I had this little spot worked out, Larry. I said, Larry, just begin. I'm going to wrestle. I'm going to eat you up a little bit. And I said, didn't cut me off. And Larry could do it. Okay. Then I turned around for some reason. I said, Larry, as soon as I take my jacket off, just attack me. He goes, okay. Well, I get announced. I take my jacket off. He comes over and gloms me, whatever. Well, then I get on him, eat him up. Northern Lights, 1, 2, 3. I come through the back, and there's Cornette. God damn it, Bobby Blaze. What the fuck are you thinking? He goes, you've been trained by Malenkos. You know a million fucking holds and moves. And he's just chewing my ass on the stairwell, right? And he goes, and you got Larry Santo to work with, and you know he can work. He goes, God damn it, I got to change the next card. He said, because I got Killer Kyle going out there against Mike Furnas, and Mike Furnas don't know jack shit. And he was supposed to attack Kyle, or Kyle was going to attack them. Kyle was going to attack him and just beat him up until the finish. And you done the same damn thing. And I was just like, oh, I did fuck up. So they had to slide in another match because they didn't want to see 2 matches in a row where basically someone gets attacked and then, because that's had Larry just attacked me, then I just started eating them up and went home. So he had to throw a match in on that, so that threw his schedule off in his mind. Then he had to go back and tell Kyle, try to give him something more than what fucking Bobby Blaze gave Larry Santo. But the thing was, as soon as the show and a couple more matches, TVs, whatever, pressure's off, whatever, as soon as that was over, it was all good. And I knew I went over and I just put my head down and I looked at Robert Gibson and I knew he and I had to do another thing on that same taping. And I was like, I just lost my job, didn't I? He goes, no, man. He goes, as soon as this taping's over, he's already forgot about it. Fuck it. Don't worry about it. You sure? He said, Bobby, I've known Jimmy a long time. It's good. And I was like, okay. And then by the time next taping rolled around, it's like, it's forgotten, So, yeah, he can go, man. He can go off. And I like that about him.
Was Mike Furnas, right, so he was the brother of Doug Furnas, wasn't he? Was he the guy who could only do the tackle, and then he did a tackle so hard he ended up tackling himself out the ring?
Yeah. Hell of a nice guy, but just wrestling-wise, you'd never know. He's, Doug's brother. Just he come in, UT football player, worked hard. He was doing some dock work, and he was hitting the gym, and he was finishing, I think he's finished his graduate work, actually. And he just really didn't catch on to the whole, wrestling business part of it, But, yeah, good guy, good body. Just nothing like his brother, though.
You weren't on the Dairy Queen incident bus, were you? Okay.
I've been to that Dairy Queen, but no, I had no problems there.